So in Afghanistan, you don't understand yourself solely as an individual. You understand yourself as somebody's son, somebody's uncle, somebody's aunt. And so you're always part of something bigger. And as a very famous author of the popular book Kite Runner, Khalid Hosseini said, Afghanistan has always been about something bigger. And this has been true during the Soviet invasion in occupation in 1978, and now also true as the US withdraws from Afghanistan. But to understand this more clearly, to understand the nuances of domestic politics and the play of international politics in Afghanistan, we have on this gloriously humid August afternoon, a webinar put together by the Center for International Relations and Community Wellbeing, the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan and its aftermath. Or as somebody said, or several people say, Louis Curtis, director of the South Asia Center at the National Security Council for US, the Taliban handover, the Afghanistan's handover to the Taliban. So whichever way you look at it. And we have none other to explain the situation in Afghanistan than Ambassador Sham Saran, who I've had the pleasure of speaking to only last week, Ambassador Jayant Prasad, Dr. Ved Pratap Vedic. I hope he's joined now. And of course, Ambassador LL Mehrotra. I will introduce each one of them in a short while. Of course, they need no introduction, but I will still go through their very, very distinguished careers. But before I do that, and since there has been a request, I am Neha Bansal, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator for this afternoon. I've served the UN for 10 years. And the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, looking at drug trafficking and opium cultivation in Afghanistan. As many of you know, that has been one of the main funding sources for different terrorist groups. I'm an international development expert with a degree from Harvard University, where I'm also a fellow. And as Ambassador Saran knows, I head now a program in preventive diplomacy called Asianism Retold. I was also trained by Professor Nick Burns, who happened to be US's former ambassador to NATO and currently nominated US's ambassador to China. And I'm also a dancer, a Kathak dancer. But I have to say that while I've been asked to moderate this afternoon session, by no virtue am I any expert in Afghanistan. And I think it's because of that reason that I've been asked to moderate this session, because Afghanistan and what's happened in this country has become all of our concerns. It's no more about the experts. We're all very sort of tuned into what's happening in that country. So without any further delay, I'm going to invite Ambassador LL Mehrotra, founder president of the Center for International Relations and Community Wellbeing, to come and give us the opening remarks. A few words about Ambassador Mehrotra. He served as liaison officer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama from 1961 to 1962, charged the affairs of India and Beijing, Consul General of India in San Francisco, head of Mission Embassy of India in Moscow, Ambassador of India to Argentina, to Yugoslavia, and the High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka. He served as Secretary East in the Ministry of External Affairs from 1990 to 1992. And if this was not enough, he refuses to take a break even after his retirement. And after his retirement, he was appointed UN Secretary General's personal representative in Cambodia, where he endeavored to bring about reconciliation among conflicting military and political groups. Over to you, Ambassador Mehrotra. It is the extreme left-hand icon on your computer. You just have to unmute it. You just have to press it.
Is that right? Our connection with Afghanistan, as you all know, is as old as history itself. Uh, we all know the Indus Valley civilization as the offspring, as the fountain spring of our ancient civilization. But Afghanistan was literally the precursor of that civilization, as any archaeologist will tell you. And then we have that connection got quite strengthened with the passage of time. You have Panini, who codified Sanskrit. He was born and brought up in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, after Buddha, became a very important sector for Buddhism. Bamyan Buddha holds the testimony to that. Uh, mm, uh, in this land, uh, with which we have been very closely connected when Seleucus had a matrimonial alliance with Chandragupta, and then offered the hand of his daughter Helena to him, and then Ashoka extended his empire to include Afghanistan, as the Shahabazgadi inscription in Kharoshti proves to the hilt. That land, which has been so close to us in history, now is in a melting pot. And we have felt compelled to extricate ourselves, lock, stock, and barrel from that land, where even during the last 20 years, we have rendered human service in terms of reconstruction and development at a significant cost to us. Now, the how and why of it will be brought out by the distinguished speakers of today, starting with Ambassador Sham Saran, who is before you. And I would now request Neha to kindly introduce him and give the floor to him. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ambassador Mehrotra. Over to you, Ambassador Sham Saran. But just give me a minute to say a couple of words about you. Ambassador Sham Saran joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1970. He served in many countries, including Beijing, Tokyo, and Geneva. He's been India's ambassador to Myanmar, Indonesia, Nepal, and High Commissioner to Mauritius. As Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's office in 1991, from 1991 to 1992, he advised the Prime Minister on foreign policy, nuclear, and defense-related issues. After a career spanning 34 years in the Foreign Service, he was appointed India's Foreign Secretary in 2004 and held that position till his retirement in 2006. Subsequent to his retirement, he was appointed Prime Minister's Special Envoy and Chief Negotiator on Climate Change. And of course, this was not in the notes that were sent to me by by the center, but I've known Ambassador Saran to have a keen interest in the sitar and also in camping. And I believe he was on his camp very recently. So Ambassador Saran, tell us, Afghanistan, it is unsettling for us to see what's happening in Afghanistan, the violence, the bloodshed, and both in international and internal politics play out. But how much of this must we sit back and watch and allow it to happen as part of Afghanistan's natural process? And, for these factions to find their balance of power, how much of this must we allow to happen? And how much of this is part of the foreign intervention design in Afghanistan? Over to you, Ambassador Saran.
Thank you very much, Neha. You said that you may have been chosen to be moderator because you are not an expert on Afghanistan. I'm even less of an expert on Afghanistan, so therefore perhaps I'm the lead speaker today. Let me just make a few opening remarks, and then perhaps we can debate this. Number one, to answer your question, we have to understand that Afghanistan is a diverse country. So, of course, you have the Pashtuns as a majority, ethnic group. But you also have the Tajiks, you have the Hazaras, you have the Uzbeks, and perhaps a few other nationalities as well. You have religious diversity as well, because even though the Taliban is very fundamentalist Sunni group, but you also have the Hazaras who are a Shia group, and there has always been tension between the two. There is also within the Taliban itself, I think it would be a mistake to think about the Taliban as being a monolithic entity. It is not. There are different factions within the Taliban itself, and perhaps one of the reasons why it has been difficult still to come up with a government, whether it is an inclusive government or just even a Taliban government, would suggest that maybe there are some factional tensions within the Taliban itself. Within the Taliban also, we have to take into account the fact that in addition to, of course, the fundamentalist elements who are still there, and particularly those who are in the sense the shock troops who really carry the arms, there is also a certain section which over the last 20 years has developed a certain sophistication, has been exposed to the bright lights of Doha. They have also, I believe that several of them have their children who have studied in schools including their daughters studying in schools in Doha. So it is perhaps an even more complicated sort of a group than it was before. So if one has to make any kind of a prognostication as to are we looking at the dust settling down and the Taliban being able to establish not just military control, but actually governance over the entire country, I think that would perhaps be taking a very optimistic view. So my sense is that even though there may be that kind of military control, coercive control, as one might say, over the country, I think that the issue of governance, which has really been the major issue with Afghanistan for maybe even for a couple of 100 years, if not more, the issue of governance is going to be still something that will, in a sense, keep the pot boiling in Afghanistan. So I do not see that with the takeover of Taliban, there is a certain closure that we are looking at, even though we may not like the shape of that closure in terms of the nature of the Taliban and its fundamentalist orientation. I do not really see that kind of a stable situation is likely to endure. So that is the first point I would make, that we are talking in terms of should we recognize, should we not recognize, do we remove the terrorist label from the Taliban, or we should not do that. I think that the situation, as we have seen, continues to be very fluid. And in such a fluid situation, perhaps a certain degree of patience on our side, I believe, is certainly called for. So that's the first point I would make. The second point is, and that concerns us very directly, is the issue of terrorism, cross-border terrorism. Now, in that sense, please do not forget that until maybe yesterday, the Taliban was still regarded as a terrorist group. In some countries, in fact, the terrorist label still endures. I believe that even Russia, which has considered the Taliban as a terrorist group in the past, has not removed that label so far, at least as far as I am aware. Are we making certain assumptions about the Taliban being able to, number one, willing to and able to deliver on its assurance that Afghanistan will no longer be a place from which the interests of other countries will be threatened because of the existence of various kinds of terrorist groups. Now, to some extent, that assurance has been blown out of existence by what has happened at the Taliban, at the Kabul airport. And the fact that the US has had to, once again resume drone attacks in order to target such elements, and there may be more of that. I think any credibility to that assurance is still rather suspect. And I think that for us is very important. I think we should assume that under the Taliban, there might be neither the willingness nor the ability to really control several of these groups which have been operating out of Afghanistan for the last several years, targeting neighboring countries, including China. And even Pakistan has complained that Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan actually operates from outside, from Afghanistan. And nearly 5,000 of the TTP cadres have been released from prisons after the Taliban have taken over. Now, where are they? Where have they disappeared? What kind of threat will they pose to Pakistan itself? The Chinese have extracted an assurance, but I'm not very sure how confident they are that that assurance will be actually acted upon. So I think the second point I would like to make is we must work on the assumption that there is probably going to be a heightened threat from cross-border terrorism as a result of the recent developments that have taken place in Afghanistan. And that means, of course, that we have to be far more alert, far more sort of prepared to be able to deal with that situation. And in that context, of course, I have also pointed out the importance of making certain that the sort of fluid situation in Kashmir itself should be addressed as soon as possible through the resumption of political processes, democratic processes, because if there is one part of our country which is the most vulnerable from this development, it is Jammu and Kashmir. So that's the second point I would like to make. The third and last point I would like to make is the issue, of course, do we engage with the Taliban or we don't engage with the Taliban? Now, given the fact that there is a certain ground reality in Afghanistan, I'm not against engagement. I'm not against a dialogue, but it has to be with your eyes wide open. That there is a certain history to our relations with the Taliban, a rather negative history. And we also would have concerns going forward. For example, what will be the role of the Haqqani group in whatever dispensation which is established? Because as you are aware, that two of the very sort of serious attacks which took place against the Indian embassy, and of course Ambassador Jayant Prasad was very much there when this attack took place. We lost one of our brightest young diplomats in that attack, a military attaché also in that attack, and that was not the only one. We had a repeat attack the very next year, and also attacks against various, not just consulates, but also against Indians who had been helping, Afghanistan, the medical mission and other missions. They were also targeted. So if they are going to be a very leading part of this new dispensation, that would certainly be a cause of concern, because this particular group is far more closely associated and aligned with the ISI, Pakistani ISI, than perhaps other groups. And therefore, there will be an effort on the part of Pakistan, if nobody else, to make certain that there are incidents, there are attacks which are carried out, which essentially convince the Indians that it's better to stay away from Afghanistan rather than be vulnerable to attacks. And in that sense, the removal of our diplomatic personnel and other citizens from Afghanistan, some people have criticized it. I think it was a prudent decision, taking into account that background. But if there is a chance to engage with the new dispensation, to be able to resume some presence in Afghanistan, that would be worthwhile for us, for the simple reason that one of the biggest assets that we have in Afghanistan is the tremendous goodwill, pervasive goodwill that we enjoy within that country amongst its people. And for that reason, I have also said that we must never lose faith with the people of Afghanistan. We must never, sort of devalue that huge asset that we have built up over many years of really sympathy and support for the people of Afghanistan. So I believe that that is one of the most important assets that we have. So what is the way in which we can keep faith with the people of Afghanistan? How can we still extend support to them in this hour of great crisis for them? This is something that we should certainly be thinking about. Of course, it is for the government to work out how this can be done, but this is certainly something that I would hope that it is being kept in mind. Lastly, I would say that any sense that we are isolated and we are out of the game, I think that is a premature conclusion to make. I think India will remain an important player, and those who may think immediately that they have been the chief gainers, like Pakistan, for example, and secondarily China. Given the reasons that I have mentioned, as my first point, I'm not so certain that there is going to be over the next months to come. That these two countries, Pakistan as the cat's paw and China behind it, that they will actually succeed in having a very stable and peaceful Afghanistan, which then they can use as a platform to target India. That remains to be seen. And if we engage in, I think, active diplomacy with the countries of the region, I think there is no reason to feel that we are completely isolated. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Swaran. Some very clear, strong points. I think I take your point on, the important bit being maintaining our faith with the Afghani people. I think that at no point is something that we can afford to lose. I've been speaking to some of my friends who are in the police in Kashmir, and for some reason there isn't any heightened sort of alarm, or at least that's what they state as of now. But I do take your point. I think we should expect that spillover in some, or at least be prepared for it.
I say that because, this victory by the Taliban in Afghanistan is a tremendous morale booster.
Right.
For, groups all across the world, not just this region. And I think Kashmir will not be an exception to that. Of course, we have better capabilities today, better counterterrorism capabilities. We have better intelligence. But the fact that we have not come to a satisfactory closure with regard to the political changes that have taken place in Jammu and Kashmir, we have not been able to address the deep sense of alienation, particularly amongst the young in Jammu and Kashmir. That should be a cause of concern. Thank you. Sorry, absolutely. I just wanted to make that point.
No, absolutely. I think these are all very complex issues, and it's not, one-sided. Not one factor influencing it. Even your point on how we engage with the Taliban and what it does on the Pakistani side, I think has always been nebulous. Even during the presence of the US, the US was always very careful about bringing India in, because it would sort of always put Pakistan in many ways on red alert, and that would have several repercussions as well. Ambassador Prasad, I'd like to invite you to respond to Ambassador Saran's three very clear points, which is that does the Taliban have the capacity to govern? How do we look at that? The situation is very fluid. Do they even have the capacity to deliver on their promises to sort of control terrorism? And the last bit, how do we engage with the Taliban, if at all? A few words about Ambassador Prasad before I give you the floor. Ambassador Prasad was India's ambassador to Afghanistan, Algeria and Nepal, and the UN Conference on Disarmament, Geneva. At headquarters in the Ministry of External Affairs, he served as Special Secretary, Public Diplomacy. He was Rapporteur of the UN Commission on Human Rights, Geneva, from 86 to 87. Fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, Harvard University, and I think in that I share my alma mater with you. Member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament Matters, 2005 to 2007, and visiting scholar, Center for Advanced Study of India, University of Pennsylvania. Ambassador Prasad was also Director General at the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, New Delhi. Over to you, Ambassador.
Neha, the situation in Afghanistan is utterly chaotic. So Ambassador Saran has said that he doubts the capacity and the intention both of the present leadership. That still has to be tested, of the Taliban leadership. But I don't want to make a deep dive into history, but unless you go back at least to the Doha Agreement, you won't understand what has happened in Afghanistan today. In the Doha Agreement, the Taliban was legitimized and the Afghan government was undermined because they were completely kept out of the negotiations. And there were no conditions at all imposed on the Taliban. It was a kind of withdrawal agreement of the American forces, which both the Taliban wanted and the US government wanted. So they came to an agreement very fast without laying down any red lines like a comprehensive ceasefire or a political process in Afghanistan. And they are still talking about an inclusive government. But how and why should the Taliban have an inclusive government now? They might do some window dressing. They might have a council where they might place leaders who are currently under a kind of house arrest, like Abdullah and President Karzai. They might promote them into the council. And even in the Taliban leadership, the people who were fighting were different from the people who were negotiating with the Americans in Doha. The head of the political office, Mullah Baradar, who was declared deputy in the Taliban even in the lifetime of Mullah Omar. I doubt very much whether he will play a major role, because the factions which are powerful in Kabul right now of the Taliban are the armed faction. The Haqqani faction is foremost among them. The brother of Jalaluddin Haqqani, Haji Khalilur Rahman Haqqani, is the security chief of Kabul. The commando unit of the Taliban, the Badr 133 force, which is entirely outfitted by American arms like M4 and M16 rifles and night vision equipment. this force is going to raise the level of conflict sooner or later in the entire neighborhood, and India will not remain untouched from it. But the country which will suffer most is Pakistan because of the reasons that Ambassador Saran mentioned. After all, there has been not a single instance of a Taliban attack on the TTP, which is of interest to Pakistan. And they have, in fact, released TTP members. And the TTP comprises of people who, like many in the Taliban in Afghanistan, believe that Taliban frontiers or Afghan frontiers now extend from the Durand line up to the river Indus, encompassing the whole of Pakhtunistan, Fata, Balochistan. So the whole province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, for example. In fact, there are more Pashtuns who live in Pakistan than in Afghanistan, which explains also partly the success that Taliban has had. But again, without going into history, let me say that the withdrawal on the 1st July night and the 2nd July morning, which finished at 3 a.m., without telling the Afghan commander, the whole of the American forces, about between 2,500 and 3,000, and 17,000 contractors who were maintaining the Afghan Air Force, they left Bagram. And the Afghans came to know only when the dawn broke. And then they found that from the helicopters and the planes, the decoy equipment, the electronic equipment, which prevent ground attacks on them, that had been removed. So there are very good accounts now from the former Defense Minister Bismillah Khan Mohammadi and the head of the Afghan National Army's Commando Force, Sadat. He has written in New York Times. So we know exactly what happened after that. The Afghan army just folded up because they had no aids, no reconnaissance, no mobility, no medevac, no heavy equipment, and finally, no ammunition. And so the village elders decided one by one, in 9 days, starting from Nimroz, province after province fell, so that by the 16th, the Taliban were in Kabul. Now, what is the situation in Kabul? I agree entirely with Ambassador Saran, who says that the Taliban leadership has to show a degree of unity, and one doesn't know whether they have it, because Kabul presents a very strange spectacle. Different parts of the Taliban went and occupied different parts of the presidential palace. And the defense ministry was occupied by Qayyum Zakir, who was in Guantanamo. And the interior ministry was occupied by Sadr Ibrahim. Now, these two gentlemen were the heads of the Taliban Eastern Military Commission and the Western Military Commission, respectively. So it's no surprise that even before the Taliban chief, Habibatullah, has made his appearance, if he is around, he'll make his appearance soon after the 31st. But even before that, they have been declared acting defense minister and acting interior minister. Why? Because they are in occupation of those buildings. So they are incidentally the two acting ministers. Other ministers like the finance minister Gul Agha Achakzai or the Culture and Information Minister Zabihullah Mujahid, they are permanent ministers already. So there are other Afghan factions too, like Mullah Umar San, Mullah Yaqub, Mullah Baradar. He is also from Kandahar. But the most powerful force is that led by Khalifa Sirajuddin Haqqani, the legendary Jalaluddin Haqqani's son. So he, along with his brother Anis Haqqani, even if he doesn't get a ministerial post, he'll really be calling the shots about how the Afghan authorities are going to behave in future. So what are India's options? India essentially will have to have a strategy which unfolds as the situation evolves. We cannot precipitately decide on a course of action. I agree that Taliban has to be engaged, but engaging the Taliban doesn't mean accepting its philosophy or agreeing with everything that they say. Negotiating with the Taliban or engaging with the Taliban makes sense because the Taliban must be aware of our priorities. And first and foremost is the security priority. Because when Taliban was in power earlier, the elite, the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Hizbul Mujahideen, they had training camps in eastern Afghanistan in the province of Khost, Paktia, Paktika, Nangarhar, and Ghazni. So this shouldn't happen again. Then they must allow our embassy and consulates to function. But I doubt that very much because for the initial year at least, the Taliban authorities will remain closely under Pakistani control because the Haqqani network is closely allied both with the ISI and with Al-Qaeda. So we have a problem there. And thirdly, if the Taliban behaves as they say they would, with moderation and with independence, then of course we can have some kind of a relationship with them. But that will be seen as the weeks and months unfold. Right now, the situation in Kabul is pretty bad because what has happened is that in the last 48 hours, the Afghans were simply not allowed to go to the airport. Only the Americans and some foreign nationals reached there, but not the Afghan Americans. They couldn't reach. And President Biden, within hours of the bombing, announced that Taliban had no role in it, that ISIS, Khorasan, Daesh had a role in it, and there was American retribution that followed. But it is odd that the Haqqani network has been known to be permissive in allowing the ISIS Khorasan to operate from their areas that they control. So President Bush reacted to 12 US servicemen and 1 naval medic being killed in the bombing. What about the 2,400 Americans who were killed? I'm not saying that we should make President Biden the fall person because he is not singly responsible for the American withdrawal. After all, it was President Obama who in 2009 had adopted the exit strategy, which was not at all about strategy, but all about exit. President Trump doubled down on it. So at the end of President Obama's regime, there were 10,000 American soldiers in Afghanistan. At the end of the Trump presidency, there were 5,000. And by the time of the Bagram pullout on the 1st of July, there were only under 3,000. So that is the trajectory which the United States took. And they have forgotten all the pledges that they made to the Afghan people. But because we live in this area and because we have earned a goodwill with the Afghans in the last 2 decades, we should not fritter it away. And some of the first things that we have to do quickly is that will also be a test of the Taliban, to start granting student visas to Afghans who have on self-financing basis or on the basis of the very successful ICCR scholarship scheme got admission already in Indian universities. They are stuck up in Afghanistan. We have to pull out the Indian local employees of the embassy and the consulates who stuck by us in very trying times. We have to give e-visas, which we promised, but haven't yet activated for some glitches. All the Afghans who are threatened, who are either threatened because of their political stance or beliefs, or who are threatened because they are simply journalists or artists or rights activists or women's rights activists. So and this will be a good test. The Taliban has said that they will allow these people to come by commercial flights. So we should test them on this. We should grant the visas and see whether they can travel, because Afghan airlines are very keen to resume flights to India. So we must enable an atmosphere which allows that. That's something that can be done in the very near future. I'll stop here so that we can have some Q&As.
Thank you, Ambassador Prasad. I think like you began and you used the correct word, I think it seems like there's utter chaos at the moment, complete chaos. And not to mention the volume of ammunition that the Americans have also left behind in Afghanistan that will now fall into all the wrong hands, that will sort of sustain this chaos, if I may say, for longer. And I also hear both yourself and Ambassador Saran sort of say that it's perhaps time for us to sit back and watch as things, may or may not fall into place. At some point, engage with the Taliban. When we do that, we'll have to see, but perhaps, putting on the table our security concerns. But the question in my mind, perhaps on the table, is that what is the cost of not engaging with the Taliban at this point, or maybe in the near future? I mean, it seems like a group that is that has factions within factions, incoherent, not able to deliver on their promises, completely in chaos. Even if we are to put our requests on the table, it is quite likely that there's nothing going to be done about those requests. So conversely, what would be the cost of actually not engaging with the Taliban? I'll allow you a few minutes if you'd like to respond to that before I turn over to Dr. Vaidik.
I think, as I said, we have to engage with the Taliban. We needn't put that on hold, because we were engaging with the Taliban from the time the intra-Afghan negotiations started, and our foreign minister went and attended that. And then the Qatari foreign ministry said that twice Indian delegations went to Doha in June and met with the Taliban. So it's not as if the Taliban is a mystery to us. We have been engaging with them. And we have always maintained consistently that there is no good or bad Taliban. But there is, in our minds, the distinction between moderate factions of Taliban and extremist factions of Taliban. There is in our mind a distinction between the independent-minded Taliban, which want to do things in what is in the interest of their country, and dependent Taliban. So if the Taliban shows themselves to be an independent and moderate group, we have no hesitation in engaging with them. But right now, when they don't even have a government, let's wait at least till the 31st, 48 hours more, and let's see whether Habatullah emerges, and let's see whether they have a coherent government. And then let's engage with them. And as I said, there are things that we can do very quickly, which we should proceed and do anyhow.
Right, absolutely. I think we take your point on that in terms of student visas and getting the artists and the intellectuals, if they are willing to and want to, into the country. I turn over now to Dr. Vaidik, Dr. Pratap Vaidik. Dr. Vaidik is a well-known scholar, political analyst, and orator, columnist, and in national and international affairs. He has worked with the Press Trust of India for a decade as the founder editor of its Hindi news agency, Bhasha. He was awarded a degree of PhD in international affairs from the Jawaharlal Nehru University in 1971. Dr. Vaidik is a linguist. He knows Russian, Persian, English, Sanskrit, Hindi, and several other Indian languages. While doing research on Afghan foreign policy, Dr. Vaidik studied at Columbia University, New York, School of Oriental and African Studies, London Institute of the Peoples of Asia, Moscow, and did extensive field work in Afghanistan. He's been frequently appearing in Indian and foreign television and broadcasting networks since 1962, and therefore very familiar to many of us. Dr. Vaidik is widely traveled. He has more than a dozen international and national awards to his name. He's been a member of several advisory committees of the Government of India, and he's published 3 books and more than 100 articles and research papers on Afghanistan. Over to you, Dr. Vaidik, to give us your perspective on what's happening and what we should expect will happen in the coming future.
Thank you, Madam. Am I audible? Can I?
Yes, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Right. If you permit me, shall I speak in Hindi?
We would love that.
Yeah, right. मुझे बहुत खुशी है कि श्याम शरण जी जैसे अनुभवी कूटनीतिज्ञ और जयंत प्रसाद जी जैसे मेरे परम प्रिय मित्र के साथ मुझे आज यहाँ बोलने का अवसर मिल रहा है, वो भी लखन मेहरोत्रा जी जैसे वरिष्ठ राजनयिक के सामने। अफगानिस्तान से मुझे बहुत प्यार है और मेरा सभी लोगों से घनिष्ठ संबंध रहा है, तालिबान से भी और दूसरे जो फैक्शंस हैं वहाँ, करजई के या अब्दुल्ला के या और नेताओं के, सबसे पिछले 50 साल में मेरा संबंध रहा है और अभी भी लगभग रोज उनसे मेरी बात होती रहती है। सबसे पहले मैं तालिबान के बारे में बताना चाहता हूँ कि तालिबान लोग कौन हैं। वास्तव में तालिबान लोग गिलजई पठान हैं। इनकी जो सेंट्रल कमेटी थी, मुल्ला उमर जिसके अध्यक्ष थे, उसमें एक भी गैर गिलजई नहीं था। गिलजई कौन होते हैं? अलाउद्दीन खिलजी वाले, जिनको हम लोग खिलजी बोलते हैं, उनको पठान लोग गिलजई बोलते हैं। तब जब 1999 में हमारा जहाज हाईजैक हुआ और कंधार में था, तो तालिबान के जो एम्बेसडर थे अब्दुल हकीम मुजाहिद, वो मुझे मिले वाशिंगटन डीसी में। उन्होंने मुझसे कहा कि आपकी सरकार क्यों नहीं हमको रिकॉग्नाइज करती है। तो मैंने उनसे पूछा कि आपने सारे गिलजई भर रखे हैं, उसमें पठानों का भी प्रतिनिधित्व नहीं है, पोपल जई नहीं है, अहमद जई नहीं है, मोहम्मद जई नहीं है, कैसे हम रिकॉग्नाइज करें? तो उन्होंने कहा कि भाई हमारी मजबूरी है, और ये सब बात उनसे हुई। दूसरे दिन जब मैं लंदन पहुंचा तो मालूम पड़ा कि हमारा प्लेन हाईजैक हो गया है। आप विश्वास करें कि प्रधानमंत्री अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी ने मुझे फ़ोन किया, मैं लंदन में था, मैंने वहाँ से उनको फ़ोन किया। इनके जो एम्बेसडर मुझसे मिला करते थे, अनऑफिशियल एम्बेसडर थे वो, उन्होंने तुरंत मुल्ला उमर से बात की। पीर गैलानी से मैं खुद मिलने गया लंदन में और उन्होंने हमारा जहाज छोड़ा। इसलिए तालिबान के बारे में मेरा वो इम्प्रेशन नहीं है जो आम हिंदुस्तानी का है या आम डिप्लोमेट का है। मेरा इम्प्रेशन ये है कि उनसे बात करके उनको समझाया जा सकता है, बात करके उनको प्रभावित किया जा सकता है। तो अब तालिबान में सिर्फ गिलजई पठान नहीं है, ये मुल्ला बरदर पोपलजई है। पोपलजई कौन है? 1838 में जो ब्रिटेन ने वहाँ शासक स्थापित किए थे, शाह शुजा, वो पोपलजई थे। ये हामिद करजई कौन है? हामिद करजई के वालिद पिताजी अफगान पार्लियामेंट के डिप्टी स्पीकर थे। उनका नाम था आगाए वर्दक। उन्होंने मुझे पहली बार पार्लियामेंट दिखाई थी, अब से करीब 52 साल पहले। तो ये भी पोपल जई थी। तो अब आप ये देखिए कि तालिबान से सिर्फ गैर गिलजई पठानी नहीं जुड़े हैं अफगानिस्तान के, उनके साथ उज़्बेक, तुर्कमेन, ताजिक, किर्गिज, मोए सुर्ख, सारे संप्रदायों के 13-14 संप्रदाय हैं वहाँ। हजारों लोग पता नहीं जुड़े हैं कि नहीं जुड़े हैं, बाकी सब उनसे जुड़ गए हैं। इसलिए तालिबान का स्वरूप बदला है। पिछले 20-25 साल में तालिबान में नई पीढ़ियों का आगमन हो गया है। उनसे भी मेरा संपर्क बना हुआ है। कुछ जर्मनी में रहते हैं, कुछ इंग्लैंड में रहते हैं, कुछ टोरंटो में रहते हैं। सबसे मेरी बात होती रहती है। इसके अलावा आप ये देखें कि तालिबान जब से सत्तारूढ़ हुए हैं, बल्कि उसकी भी पहले से, दोहा में जब तालिबान के काबुल में आने की कोई बात नहीं थी, जरा भी संभावना नहीं थी, तब उन्होंने बयान दिया था कि कश्मीर भारत का आंतरिक मामला है, उससे हमारा कोई लेना देना नहीं। वही तालिबान जब डेलीगेशन लेके बीजिंग गए और दूसरे शहर में भी गए, वहाँ उन्होंने कहा कि उइगर मुसलमानों से हमारा कोई लेना देना नहीं है, वो चीन का आंतरिक मामला है, हम बोलेंगे नहीं। तो मेरा ये कहना है कि तालिबान में काफ़ी मेच्योरिटी आई है। तालिबान का स्वरूप काफ़ी बड़ा है, फैला है। और तालिबान ने हमारी एम्बेसी पे हमला नहीं किया है। जब जयंत बाबू वहाँ थे, बुरी तरह से हमला हुआ, और एम्बेसी पर ही नहीं हुआ। हमने जो जरन दिलाराम सड़क बनाई है 212 किलोमीटर की ईरान तक जाने के लिए, उसको तोड़ने की कोशिश भी हुई है। वो सब पाकिस्तान के इशारे पर होता था। लेकिन अभी हम देख रहे हैं पिछले 15 दिन में न भारतीयों पे हमला हुआ है, न हमारी एम्बेसी पे हमला हुआ है, न हमारे खिलाफ कोई बयान उन्होंने जारी किया है, बल्कि जो हमने $3 बिलियन खर्च किए हैं अफगानिस्तान में, उसकी तारीफ की है उन्होंने। और ये कहा है कि भारत से हम अच्छे रिश्ते बनाना चाहते हैं। अब ये एक अलग बात है कि कहना क्या और करना क्या, कथनी और करनी में अंतर हो सकता है, लेकिन डिप्लोमेसी में ये जरूरी है कि हम सावधानी भी रखें पूरी, और बात भी करें। मुझे अफसोस इस बात का है कि भारत सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल का अध्यक्ष बना पहली बार, हमने वो मौका ही खो दिया। हम सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल से अब से 15-20 दिन पहले या महीना भर पहले बन गए थे अध्यक्ष। हम तब कहते कि एक शांति सेना, पीस फोर्स भेज दे, साल भर वहाँ रहे वो पीस फोर्स, तो फिर इलेक्शन करा दे। अगर जनता तालिबान को चुनना चाहती है तो चुन ले। अगर पीस फोर्स डट के वहाँ रहती और भारत की अध्यक्षता में प्रस्ताव पारित होता, तो आज ये दिन देखना नहीं पड़ता जो आज हम अफगानिस्तान में देख रहे हैं। लेकिन फिर भी मेरा कहना है कि हमें तालिबान से बात करना चाहिए। मैं तालिबान को रिकॉग्नाइज करने की बात नहीं कह रहा हूँ, तालिबान की तारीफ करने की बात नहीं कह रहा हूँ, उनसे बहुत सावधान रहने की बात कह रहा हूँ, लेकिन उनसे हमको बात करना चाहिए। जहाँ तक ये हक्कानी ग्रुप का सवाल है, ये जयंत बाबू ने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा और श्याम चरण जी भी ठीक कह रहे हैं कि हक्कानी ग्रुप हमारे बहुत खिलाफ है। सिर्फ हक्कानी ग्रुप ही नहीं है, और भी छोटे मोटे कई ग्रुप्स बने हुए हैं तालिबान के अलग अलग प्रांतों में, खास तौर से कुनार में, जलालाबाद में, पख्तिया में, जो भारत के खिलाफ हैं। तो वो पाकिस्तान के भड़काए हुए हैं। वो लोग हमारे खिलाफ बराबर काम करते रहेंगे, आज भी, पहले भी करते रहे, आज भी बोल रहे हैं और आगे भी करते रहेंगे। उनसे हमें सावधान रहना है। लेकिन जरा देखिए कि डॉक्टर अब्दुल्ला बात कर रहे हैं, हामिद करज़ई बात कर रहे हैं, जिन्होंने तालिबान को 10 साल तक मारा है, तालिबान के खिलाफ जिन्होंने पूरा हमला बोला है, वो उनसे बराबर बात कर रहे हैं और हम बात ही नहीं कर रहे हैं। दोहा में हमारे आदमी जाते हैं और उनको किनारे बैठा दिया जाता है, हाशिए में बैठते हैं। और जयंत बाबू ने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा कि अमेरिका ने सीधी साठगांठ की है तालिबान के साथ, वरना कोई वजह नहीं थी कि अमेरिकन एम्बेसी पे हमला नहीं होता। कोई वजह नहीं है कि एक भी अमेरिकी किसी तालिबान ने नहीं मारा, और तालिबान आंसू बहा रहे हैं 13 अमेरिकियों के हताहत होने पर। हम भी बहुत दुखी हैं, अमेरिका क्या कोई भी मरे तो बहुत बुरी बात है, लेकिन तालिबान आंसू बहा रहे हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि हमको लगता है कि बाइडेन प्रशासन ने और उसके पहले ट्रंप प्रशासन ने इन लोगों के साथ साठगांठ कर रखी और एक समझौता अंदरूनी कर रखा था कि भाई हम वहाँ से खिसकेंगे, हमको तो पिंड छुड़ाना है। मैं ज़ल्मई खलीलज़ाद को जानता हूँ। ज़ल्मई खलीलज़ाद उसी यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़े हैं जहाँ मैं पढ़ा हूँ, कोलंबिया यूनिवर्सिटी में न्यूयॉर्क में पढ़ते रहे हैं। मेरे दोस्त भी हैं, कई बार मुझसे मिले भी हैं। ज़ल्मई खलीलज़ाद ने बराबर ही समझौता कराया है कि किसी तरह से, किसी शर्त पे अमेरिका का वहाँ से पिंड छूट जाए। अब अमेरिका ने एड बंद कर दी है, उनके देखा देखी कई यूरोपियन देशों ने एड बंद कर दी है, जापान ने कह दिया है। लेकिन आपने एक बात पे गौर किया कि रूस बराबर उनसे बात कर रहा है, उनके डेलीगेशन को मॉस्को में बुला रहा है, चीन उनसे बराबर बात कर रहा है, अमेरिका ट्रंप ने उनके डेलीगेशन को वॉशिंगटन डीसी में बुलाया, वो बात कर रहे हैं। और आप ये भी देखें कि उनसे ईरान बात कर रहा है, जो ईरान तालिबान का बिल्कुल विरोधी था, और तालिबान जिस ईरान के विरोधी थे वो उनसे बात कर रहे हैं। लेकिन दुनिया में हम अकेले पावर हैं, अगर हम अपने आप को पावर समझते हैं, अपने आप को पावर की तरह प्रोजेक्ट कर रहे हैं, कि हम बात ही नहीं कर रहे हैं। हमको खुले में बात करने में डर क्या है? हमने क्या हमारी फॉरेन पॉलिसी सारी अमेरिका के हाथों में गिरवे रख दी है कि जो अमेरिका कहेंगे वही हम करेंगे। अभी हमारे फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी श्रृंगला परसों कहीं उन्होंने भाषण दिया था, तब उन्होंने कहा था कि तालिबान से बात करने में हमको कोई एतराज नहीं, हम बात करेंगे। अब वो अमेरिका चले गए हैं। पिछले हफ्ते हमारे विदेश मंत्री भी अमेरिका में बैठे हुए थे। यानी हमने क्या बताऊं, फारसी की एक बड़ी कहावत विचित्र मुझे याद आ रही है, वो मैं बोलूंगा नहीं क्योंकि उसका बड़ा सख्त मतलब भी है, वो अच्छा भी नहीं लगता है बोलना, लेकिन हम यही कर रहे हैं कि काम हमारा है। यानी शादी हम कर रहे हैं और फेरे कोई और पड़ रहा है। सारी चिंता हमारी है, हम परेशान हैं, हमारे पड़ोस के अंदर आतंकवाद फैल सकने की संभावनाएं हैं, उनको हमें प्रभावित करना है, उनको हमें प्रो इंडिया बनाना है, उनको मदद की जरूरत है, मदद देके हमें उन्हें पाकिस्तान से अलग करना है, और हम चुपचाप बैठे हुए हैं। और देखिए एक बात और कह के मैं समाप्त करता हूँ, ज़्यादा समय नहीं लूँगा, कि हम ये समझ रहे हैं कि वहाँ पाकिस्तानियों का राज हो गया है, पाकिस्तानियों को स्ट्रेटेजिक डेप्थ मिल गई है। वो लोग ठीक से अफगान लोगों के स्वभाव को समझते नहीं हैं, अखबार पढ़ के या डिप्लोमेटिक पेपर्स पढ़ के या किताबें पढ़ के राय बनाते हैं। मैं अफगान पिछले 50 साल में कई बार अफगानिस्तान के गांव-गांव में भी घूमा, और नॉर्थ में भी, साउथ में भी, ईस्ट में भी, वेस्ट में भी, और सेंट्रल अफगानिस्तान में भी रहा हूँ और घूमा हूँ। जब पहली बार मैं वहाँ गया तो मुझे पठान लोग कहते थे कि हम क्या इन पंजाबियों की गुलामी करेंगे? अरे डूरेंट लाइन इन्होंने खींच दी, अंग्रेज ने, मोर्टिमर डूरेंट ने खींच दी, हम उसको मानेंगे? हम डूरेंट लाइन को फूंक मार के उड़ा देंगे, ये पेशावर हमारा है, ये हमारी राजधानी बनेगा। वो पाकिस्तान को बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं करते हैं। और एक बात कह दूं कि अगर तालिबान वहाँ मजबूत हो गए, अपने पाँव पर खड़े हो गए, तो स्ट्रेटेजिक डेप्थ तालिबान को पाकिस्तान के अंदर मिलेगी। वो पाकिस्तान के अंदर गड्ढा कर देंगे, छेद कर देंगे, और पाकिस्तान की सारी जमीन को अपने लिए इस्तेमाल करेंगे। आपको मैं बताऊं कि जब सरदार मोहम्मद दाऊद खान अफगानिस्तान के प्रधानमंत्री थे, 10 साल रहे पहली बार प्रधानमंत्री, 53 से 63 तक 3 बार पाकिस्तान अफगानिस्तान के युद्ध की तैयारी हो गई, बॉर्डर पर फौजें डट गई, एक दूसरे की मारपीट हुई है, और डिप्लोमेटिक कहा सुनी तो बहुत कुछ हुई। यानी और बबर कारमाल के ज़माने में मैं कई बार सारे प्रधानमंत्रियों से मिलता रहा हूँ जाके, बबर कारमाल के ज़माने में भी 2 बार ऐसी स्थिति हो गई थी कि पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान में युद्ध छिड़ जाए, रूसियों ने रुकवाया वो। मेरा निवेदन ये है कि जो तालिबान उन लोगों से बात कर रहे हैं, और वो लोग उन तालिबान से बात कर रहे हैं जिनके हजारों सैनिकों को तालिबान और मुजाहिदीन ने मार डाला। रूस के कितने हजारों सैनिक मारे गए, अरबों रुपया खर्च हुआ, अमेरिका के 2,500-3 हजार सैनिक मारे गए, और भी लोग मारे गए। वो बात कर रहे हैं और हम बात नहीं कर रहे हैं। हमको बात करने में क्या है? हम दक्षिण एशिया के, साउथ एशिया के सबसे बड़े राष्ट्र हैं, हमारी जिम्मेदारी सबसे ज्यादा है। ये इतना गजब का मौका है, अमेरिका पे विश्वास करने की बजाय हमारी कोशिश ये होना चाहिए थी कि इस मौके पर हम पाकिस्तानियों को डराते, उनको सारे डर बताते कि देखो आपको ये खतरा हो सकता है, आपको अगर बचना है तो हमारे रास्ते पर चलिए। काबुल में एक सर्वसमावेशी सरकार बनवाइए, हामिद करजई की मदद कीजिए, अब्दुल्ला की मदद कीजिए, और हम पाकिस्तान से भी अपने रिश्ते सुधार सकते थे। जब चीन और अमेरिका अफगानिस्तान पर बात कर रहे हैं, जिनका कोल्ड वॉर चल रहा है आजकल, हाँ रोज झंझट चल रहा है उनका, हम क्यों नहीं बात कर सकते हैं पाकिस्तान से? पाकिस्तान से जब हमारे सिंचाई वाले आपस में बात कर सकते हैं, रिवर डिस्प्यूट वाले बात कर सकते हैं, हमारे डिप्लोमेट उनसे बात कर सकते हैं, उनके डिप्लोमेट हमारे उनसे बात कर सकते हैं, तो हम दक्षिण एशिया में सक्रिय कूटनीति क्यों नहीं चलाते? हमको चलानी चाहिए। इसका मतलब ये बिल्कुल नहीं है कि हम तालिबान की गलत बातों को मान लें। तालिबान के जो फैक्शंस हैं, हक्कानी फैक्शंस, और वो जो दूसरे लोग हैं जिन्होंने बम वर्षा की है अभी, वो जो अपने आप को क्या कहते हैं, मैं तो अभी इतना मैंने सब बातें कही है, ये जो खुरासान वाला ग्रुप है, खुरासान वाले लोग हैं, दाइश वाले लोग हैं, इन सब के खिलाफ हमको एक माहौल बनाना चाहिए और पाकिस्तानियों को बताना चाहिए कि अगर आप चुप बैठे रहे इसी तरह से, पाकिस्तानी चुप नहीं बैठे हैं। आप देखिए यूनुस कानूनी और वो जो विदेश मंत्री थे पहले, रब्बानी साहब का लड़का, वो सब जाके वहाँ मिल रहे हैं। 4-5 दिन उन्होंने वहाँ बात की, उन लोगों से मेरी बात भी हुई। वो मुझसे बार-बार कहते हैं कि आपका देश, आपकी सरकार क्यों नहीं हम लोगों को मदद करती? पता नहीं, अब हमारा वहाँ कोई, ना तो हमारे डिप्लोमेट वहाँ हैं, ना हमारा कोई नेता वहाँ है, ना हमारे कोई गैर राजनीतिक लोग वहाँ हैं कि जो संपर्क करें, लेकिन भारत सरकार को चाहिए कि तुरंत संपर्क करें। मुझे अफ़सोस ये है कि जयशंकर जैसा जवान आदमी, जो मैं तो उनको बच्चे थे तब से जानता हूँ, वो के सुब्रमण्यम जी के बेटे हैं, हमारे जेएनयू के पढ़े हुए हैं, पीएचडी किए हुए हैं, सारा अनुभव उनको है, और कैसे हमारी सरकार कहती है बैठे रहो और देखते रहो, वेट एंड वॉच। तो हम कहते हैं कि लेटे रहो और सोते रहो। ये कोई राजनीति नहीं है, ये कोई कूटनीति नहीं है, ये सारे दक्षिण एशिया का नेता बनना नहीं है। हमारे देश की जिम्मेदारी भारत की सबसे ज़्यादा है, सबसे ज़्यादा प्रभावित हम होंगे। ब्रिटेन के एक किसी बड़े नेता ने, शायद कंजर्वेटिव पार्टी के नेता ने कल ही कहा है कि भारत जैसे देश को सबसे अधिक चिंतित होने की ज़रूरत है, लेकिन हम सबसे ज़्यादा निश्चिंत हुए हुए हैं। तो यही कह के मैं अपनी बात समाप्त करता हूँ, और मैंने कोई अतिरेक की बात कह दी हो, गलत बात कह दी हो तो मुझे क्षमा कीजिए, लेकिन मैं भारत के हित में ही बोल रहा हूँ। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू डॉक्टर वेद वैदिक। सॉरी कि मैं आपसे हिंदी में नहीं कंटिन्यू कर पाऊंगी, क्योंकि मेरी हिंदी आपके जैसे इतनी अच्छी नहीं है, लेकिन आई थिंक टू थिंग्स निकल के बाहर आती हैं कि देयर इज नो अग्रीमेंट कि हमें बात करना चाहिए तालिबान से। शायद जैसे एम्बेसडर सारन ने कहा कि अभी भी विद इन द तालिबान इतने ज्यादा फैक्शंस हैं कि हमें नहीं पता चल रहा कि कौन सा फैक्शन मोर डोमिनेंट होगा। एक फैक्शन जिसके साथ हम बात करें और फिर पाकिस्तान की साइड से हमें प्रॉब्लम्स झेलना पड़े, या जैसे आप कह रहे हैं एक फैक्शन है जो खुद इंडियन गवर्नमेंट को फीलिंग्स दिया है उन्होंने पिछले महीनों में कि हमसे आके बात करिए। हमें पता नहीं चल रहा है कि कौन सा फैक्शन अभी डोमिनेंट होगा, तो शायद इसीलिए वेट एंड वॉच। और दूसरी बात जो आपने कही बिगनिंग में कि शायद हमें before we send military officers, we should be sending, writers and historians and artists into a country to really understand the country before we get into military action. Wo I think is also very important, especially as we are seeing कि इतनी सारी ethnic issues हैं जो sit in the crossfire with international issues. Lekin, because we're running out of time, I want to turn to some questions that we've got from those who have participated. And perhaps one question that will slightly fit in here, I think, out of the 3 questions we've got, is from Mr. Gori Khandelwal. And he has asked the question that, is Joe Biden failing in foreign policy and driving whole of Asia and Europe in turmoil? Perhaps maybe if I can start with you, Ambassador Prasad, as you were saying, even the Doha agreement was a very weak one as far as negotiation with the Taliban.
Thank you, Neha. I don't think you can hold Biden responsible for Doha, because that was negotiated by Khalilzad on behalf of President Trump. But there is no doubt that the manner in which the American troops were taken out of Bagram and the manner in which they have left the Afghans to fend for themselves has damaged America's reputation. And not just in Asia, but I have perforce to say that we have to rethink our larger relationships because of what has happened in Afghanistan. Because there are some lessons for us here that President Biden has shown that the American commitments made don't stand for anything, and that internal politics in America is much, much more important than any international commitments that they enter into. So we have to be mindful of this when we plan any big moves in or realignment in our foreign policy. That's all that I want to say.
Right. It certainly is a time for us to rethink a lot of ways in which we are engaging also with each other, I think, in the Asian region, and not completely follow the rhetoric even on China that we are getting from, the rest of the world. There's a question from Mr. Anand Dihadrai, or maybe should I say Rajni Dihadrai, as Mr. Dihadrai had requested in the beginning. Why is the Islamic State a threat in Afghanistan despite the Taliban rule? And perhaps, Dr. Vaidik, you might be able to answer this. So over to you.
What did he ask? Could you please repeat it?
So the question is, why is the Islamic State a threat in Afghanistan despite Taliban rule? And if Mr. Dihadrai on the call, he might like to provide a clarification to that question.
हाँ, उसमें असली बात क्या है कि जैसा मैंने शुरू में कहा कि तालिबान के भी कई फैक्शन हैं, और ये लोग जिन्होंने इस्लामिक स्टेट बनाया है या जिन्होंने दाइश बनाया है, ये लोग भी सब पहले तालिबान ही थे, और तालिबान के पहले ये सब लोग मुजाहिदीन थे, और इन सब पे पाकिस्तान का बहुत कब्जा था। पाकिस्तान की जेब में से निकले हुए लोग हैं ये सारे लोग। लेकिन मैंने जैसा कहा कि पठानों का स्वभाव अगर आप पहचानें तो उनके जैसा ऑटोनोमस आदमी सारी दुनिया में आपको नहीं मिलेगा। खुद मुख्तार होते हैं, खुद संप्रभु होते हैं। दे आर सॉवरेन ओवर देमसेल्व्स, देयर इज नोबडी एल्स, दे डोंट केयर फॉर एनीबडी। ये मैंने अपनी आंख से देखा है। किंग जाहिर शाह से मिलते वक्त लोग इस तरह से बात करते थे उनसे, जाहिर शाह साहब से, कि जैसे उनके यार दोस्त हैं। एक कोई औपचारिकता नहीं, कोई एक हमारे यहाँ जैसे नम्रता हम दिखाते हैं, कोई नम्रता नहीं। तो पठानों में जो एक स्वाभिमान की भावना होती है, एक स्वायत्तता की भावना होती है, उसी भावना ने उनको मुजाहिदीन से अलग किया, तालिबान से अलग किया, पाकिस्तान जो कि उनका प्रश्रयदाता था उनसे अलग किया, और अब वो अपने अकेले में खंडा खड़का रहे हैं। और वो जितना तालिबान के खिलाफ खंडा खड़का रहे हैं काबुल में, उससे ज़्यादा वो इस्लामाबाद में पंजाबियों के खिलाफ खड़का रहे हैं। और वो कह रहे हैं कि हम पाकिस्तान को भी एक इस्लामी देश बनाएंगे। हालांकि पाकिस्तान दुनिया का एकमात्र ऐसा देश है जो रिलीजन के आधार पर बना है। इजराइल भी रिलीजन के आधार पर नहीं बना है, वो जाति के आधार पर बना है। पाकिस्तान धर्म के आधार पर बना है। सऊदी अरब भी धर्म के आधार पर नहीं बना है, अकेला पाकिस्तान बना है। लेकिन उस पाकिस्तान को भी दाइश वाले इस्लामी बनाने पर अड़े हुए हैं। क्या करेंगे?
Can I come in, Neha?
Yes, sure.
Mr. Vaidik, एक आपसे बात कहनी थी. In fact, this reminds me of a couplet by a very famous Nobel Prize winner in literature, Pablo Neruda. उन्होंने कहा था, experts ranked in serried rows filled the enormous plaza full, but there is only one man who knows, and he's the man who fights the bull. कहने का मतलब ये है मिस्टर वैदिक कि हम लोग सब तरह तरह की अकल सिखाते रहते हैं कि सरकार को ये करना चाहिए, वो करना चाहिए, पर आप ये देखिए सरकार को पता है क्या करना है। आफ्टर ऑल जो फॉरेन एक्सचेंज, फॉरेन रिलेशंस के हमारे जो मिनिस्टर साहब हैं, आपने खुद कहा बड़े काबिल आदमी हैं। तो अब ये हम लोगों का ये कहना कि साहब इनको ये करना चाहिए, वो करना चाहिए, बात ठीक है, पर ये आपका अपना स्वाभाविक, अपना पर्सनल व्यू है। और मुझको ये लगता है कि आई थिंक द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया इज क्वाइट सैवी, दे अंडरस्टैंड कब क्या करना है। तो यही कहना था मुझको। थैंक यू।
हाँ, आपकी राय ठीक है, मतलब आप जो सोचते हैं वो भी ठीक है, उसको मैं गलत नहीं कह रहा हूँ, लेकिन आपका ये कहना भी ठीक है भाई मेरी ऐसी राय है, क्योंकि अफगानिस्तान पर पिछले 55 साल 56 साल से मैं काम कर रहा हूँ, वहाँ के सारे फैक्शंस को मैं जानता हूँ, और मैं बिल्कुल गलत भी हो सकता हूँ, मैं ये भी मानता हूँ, हो सकता है कि मेरी राय बिल्कुल गलत हो, लेकिन मेरी राय है, और है तो उसको जाहिर करना भी जरूरी है, मैंने जाहिर कर दी। अगर कोई फायदा उठाना चाहता है तो उठाए, उसको रद्द करना चाहता है तो रद्द कर दे, मुझे
तो
कोई
आप
फर्क नहीं
भारत
पड़ता।
आप भारत सरकार को कहिए साहब, मुझे मेरा प्लीज यूज माय ऑफिसर्स टू डू समथिंग अबाउट इट। आई एम श्योर दे विल यूटिलाइज योर सर्विसेज।
आप देखिए, नहीं मुझे कोई
But I
सर्विस
could
नहीं
come
करना है, सब मेरे साथ के लोग हैं, भारत सरकार अभी जो चला रहे हैं सब मेरे साथ के लोग हैं, मेरे अनुयायी हैं, मेरे मित्र हैं, साथी हैं, और वो सब जो रोज लिखता हूँ, मैं रोज लिखता हूँ, और करीब 200 अखबारों में छपता है, और सब पढ़ते हैं। एक भी नीति निर्माता ऐसा नहीं है जो नहीं पढ़ता हो। पता नहीं जयशंकर ने कितनी हिंदी सीखी, या मॉडर्न स्कूल में पढ़े हुए हैं, और उनके पिताजी तो हिंदी नहीं बोलते थे, लेकिन जयशंकर हिंदी जरूर जानते होंगे, और वो भी पढ़ते होंगे, उनको भी जाता है मेरा मेल। तो अब देखें, ये करें तो बहुत अच्छा है, नहीं करें तो ठीक है, हम अपने नागरिक के नाते अपनी बात तो कह दें कम से कम।
मुझे भी आता है आपकी मेल, तो मैं भी पढ़ता हूँ।
अरे बड़ी कृपा आपकी, मेहरबानी मेहरबानी सर, मेहरबानी।
we'll go ahead, but I think I think that any government will require many perspectives. So a strong view from the ground should not be overlooked. Just the last question before we turn over to the vote of thanks is that this is from Ambassador R.P. Singh, which is that the Taliban claims that they've already entered Panjshir. However, I feel that Panjshir is a big challenge for Taliban, as the people and their leadership are fully united to deal with any situation. What do you say about this, keeping in view the present situation in Afghanistan? Ambassador Prasad, over to you very quickly, if it's possible.
Before answering this question about Panjshir, I want to come back just for half a minute on this good question about the Islamic State.
Please.
Why are they unhappy? They are unhappy because they are more internationalist. Their objectives are beyond Afghanistan. They want to turn Pakistan and all the Islamic states and even non-Islamic states into havens for Islamism. So that's the basic difference. Who is supporting them, and why are they able to survive in this area where the Taliban has control or the Haqqani network has control? My answer to that is that the Pakistani military establishment has two arrows in their quiver. The main arrow is the Haqqani network, and the second reserve arrow is that of the Islamic State. So if the first arrow, which is potent, doesn't work, that they don't take action against TTP, that Pakistani interests of keeping India in check in Afghanistan are not served, that if the Pakistani Pashtuns join up with Afghan Pashtuns and that mentality, which Vaidik ji spoke about, that they don't recognize the Durand line, then in that case, Pakistan hopes on the basis of Islam to use the Islamic State Khorasan as its faction in Afghanistan. So on Panjshir, I have only one point to make. Right now, the situation is quite unclear. They are still in negotiation. But what is happening in Panjshir is not just the protest or the determination of the Tajiks of Panjshir to combat the Taliban. It is a manifestation of the aspirations of the youth in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has a median age of its population, which is 19 years and 3 months. And so that means that the majority of the Afghan population has been born after 2001. So they have certain hopes and aspirations. So the Panjshir problem will be settled easily by the Taliban if they accommodate that aspiration. And if what they have been promising, that they'll have an inclusive government which has other ethnicities. And Vaidik ji says that the present day Taliban is different from the old Taliban because it has Uzbeks, it has Tajiks, it has, by the way, no Hazara. But even Uzbeks and Tajiks and Turkomen and Kizilbash, we haven't seen who those representatives are. So the 5 or 6 factions that I mentioned when I first spoke, they are all Pashtun factions. So we don't know what the factions which represent the other ethnicities are. So we don't yet know whether Taliban today is going to be multi-ethnic in composition in its governance or not. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador Prasad. Thank you, Dr. Vaidik, and thank you, Ambassador Saran in absentia. I think, as we started off by saying that Afghanistan is a very complex issue at the moment, and there are factions within factions. We've got to, while we sort of plan our strategy, we've got to understand which of these factions becomes that dominant voice. Also, keeping a watch out for the other sub-factions, this Haqqani group. And I think a very, very important point that you make, Ambassador Prasad, which is the youth and their aspirations and how, that sort of fits into any of these groups' ideologies. And also in the manner in which we recognize it as India sort of engages with Afghanistan. So with that, just a last thank you. And may I now turn it over to Ambassador L.L. Mehrotra to give us the last words of vote of thanks.
Neha ji, may I ask a small question to Mr. Vaidik before we finish?
जी
वैदिक जी, आपसे एक छोटी सी चीज पूछने जाते हैं, क्योंकि आप बहुत घूमे हैं अफगानिस्तान में, तो जो अफगान हिंदूज हैं और सिख्स हैं, तो आपके विचार में वो सेफ हैं?
देखिए, अफगान, मैंने आज भी लिखा है कि हिंदू और सिखों का अफगानिस्तान में पिछले 200-300 साल में बहुत अच्छा स्थान रहा है। किंग अमानुल्लाह के जमाने में उनके मंत्री भी हिंदू थे, सलाहकार भी कई हिंदू थे, और किंग जाहिर शाह के जमाने में जब मैं वहाँ पढ़ता था काबुल यूनिवर्सिटी में, तो अपने कई मंदिरों में गया, और मुझे जो बाद में प्रधानमंत्री बने बबरक कारमाल, वो पार्लियामेंट के मेंबर थे और हमारे लोगों के वोट से जीतते थे, वही पहली बार मुझे हिंदू मंदिर में ले गए। तो वहाँ अफगानों का और हिंदुओं का बहुत बढ़िया संबंध रहा है। हमारे हिंदू, सिख और हिंदू भाई लोग वो सारे बिजनेस संभालते थे, ज्यादातर नौकरी करने वाले बहुत कम होते थे, खेत उनके यहाँ बहुत थे। प्रधानमंत्री सुल्तान अली किश्तमन के पिताजी और स्वयं सुल्तान अली किश्तमन एक सिख भाई के खेत में काम करते थे, मजदूरी करते थे। अच्छा। और इतना, हाँ, और उनको इतना प्रेम था, कहते थे कि हमको वो मजदूरों की तरह नहीं, भाइयों की तरह ट्रीट करते थे। इसी तरह से मैंने ये देखा कि दूर दराज के जलालाबाद, और मतलब जलालाबाद तो खैर पास है, हेरात और मज़ार शरीफ में भी जो हिंदू रहते थे उधर कम रहते थे, सब अफगानों से उनका अत्यधिक प्रेम संबंध था, और मंदिरों में आना जाना, मंदिरों के लिए भी मदद करना। आपको एक बात और बताऊं, किंग जाहिर शाह के चचा ने हमारा मंदिर, जो आसामाई का मंदिर था, वहां से एक सड़क निकलनी थी, और ये तय हुआ कि आसामाई का मंदिर गिरा दिया जाए। तो उन्होंने, किंग जाहिर शाह के शाह ने खुद इंटरवीन किया, मेरे सामने उन्होंने बुला के सारे लोगों को, अफसरों को कहा कि बोले इस मंदिर को कोई नहीं छुएगा, जैसे मस्जिद पवित्र है वैसे मंदिर पवित्र है, कोई नहीं छुएगा। तो आज भी आप देखिए कि हिंदुओं को, सिखों को वहां तंग नहीं किया गया है। उनके घरों में जाके कहीं कोई चोरी की गई हो, बलात्कार किया गया हो, मारपीट की गई हो, बिल्कुल नहीं की गई है। पहले जरूर की गई है, वो तालिबान के जमाने में भी की गई है, और मुजाहिदीन के जमाने में भी की गई है, और उसके बाद भी हुई है, अभी 2-3 साल पहले भी हुआ है। लेकिन अभी पिछले 15 दिन में ऐसा कुछ नहीं हुआ है। हाँ, उन्होंने अफगानों को अफगानिस्तान के बाहर जाने से रोका है। क्यों रोका है? कि अगर सारे हिंदू और सिख वहां से खिसक लिए तो बिजनेस कौन चलाएगा? अगर सारे डॉक्टर खिसक लिए, सारे अफसर खिसक लिए, सारे फौज के बड़े जनरल खिसक लिए तो अफगानिस्तान चलेगा कैसे? इसलिए उनकी चिंता वो तो जायज है कि लोग रहें। और आप देखें कि परसों के बम ब्लास्ट के बाद तालिबान के प्रवक्ता का ये बयान भी था कि जो भी हमारे यानी उनके अफगान हिंदू और सिख हैं वो जाना चाहें उनको भी हम छूट दे रहे हैं। तो इसका मतलब ये है कि वो एक लिबरल सरकार बनाना चाहते हैं, वो एक सर्वसमावेशी सरकार बनाना चाहते हैं। और भारत अगर उनसे संपर्क करे ना, मतलब सरकारी स्तर पे करना हो तो उस पर करें, अमेरिकियों के डर के मारे खुद नहीं करना चाहते हैं तो न करें, औरों से करवाएं और संपर्क करके उन पर प्रभाव डालें और उनको।
तो आपके विचार से वो सेफ हैं?
हाँ, सेफ है। अभी तो कोई मुझे दिक्कत नहीं दिखाई पड़ती।
अच्छा, नहीं भविष्य में भी?
हाँ, भविष्य में भी मुझे लगता है ये है कि या तो वहाँ सर्वसमावेशी सरकार बनेगी या बिल्कुल अराजकता फैल जाएगी। जैसे युगोस्लाविया टूट टाट के भंग हो गया, ऐसे मुझे लगता है कि अफगानिस्तान में सारे कबीले आपस में लड़ मरेंगे। क्योंकि पठानों का ये एक बड़ा चक्कर है कि सब पठान अपने आप को बादशाह समझते हैं, कोई किसी की सुनता नहीं है। कुछ भी हो सकता है अफगानिस्तान में, मुझे बहुत चिंता है इस बात की।
थैंक यू।
Thank you. Over to you, Ambassador Mehrotra. You're on mute, but if you'd like to just say a couple of words of thank you to our guests and conclude the meeting, please.
I'm very grateful to the moderator to ultimately giving me the floor and to give me the opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone present, to the members of the governing body of this of the Center for International Relations and Community Wellbeing, and then to all the speakers who have made such eminent presentations. Despite all the excellent expositions to which I have been a party, I feel that the current situation in Afghanistan raises more questions than answers. They have tried to answer many of them. I wonder how many questions they have successfully answered. It remains a Pandora's box. It is also a beehive. Anybody who has touched Afghanistan in the past has got it back. Whether it was the British at the peak of their empire, whether it was the Russians at the peak of their power under Brezhnev, or whether it was the Americans who tried to invest trillions of dollars into Afghanistan, or whether it was India itself with its billions of dollars of investment in Afghanistan, we are all out. And how and when it will be possible for us to get in again, only time will tell. We can only hope, and I hope against hope, that the dark clouds that are hovering over Afghanistan will one day will see the end of themselves, and there will be sunshine on that land. Let us part with that hope, and with my great admiration, with my hearty appreciation, and my very grateful thanks to all the participants and to the moderator who has shown herself as an excellent moderator, and we don't need a substitute for it. Thank you ever so much. I once again express my hearty gratitude, but most of all, I am grateful to our Secretary General, Ambassador R.P. Singh, to have put things together again. I thank you, and I know how much work goes into these little things, but ultimately you will agree with me that this would be reckoned as one of the best events organized by the center ever since its birth. Thank you ever so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. Thank you.